That cannot be healthy.
Fresh out the oven.
While many games have embraced modding over the years, it's hard to see one that's become more prevalent in the scene than Doom. People have managed to make all kinds of crazy stuff, from serious attempts to recreate Doom's design and feel, to off-the-wall jokes or overly ambitious projects that make the game almost unrecognizable. While tons of mods get started all the time, few ever really reach a finished state. And Total Chaos is one of those kinds of mods, although thankfully this one managed to be finished. Eventually. After 15 years. Sam Preble, also known as Wadaholic, started development of what would eventually become the modern version of Total Chaos somewhere around 2003 when he was only 14 years old. While very little still exists from those original builds, it wasn't until he was 29 in 2018 that he finally released the 1.0 version of the mod and called it a fully finished thing. Even if you don't like the main horror theme of Total Chaos, you still gotta give the guy and his team props for just what they've managed to accomplish. I mean, this is the Doom engine, and yet it looks almost nothing like it. It's a total conversion mod, meaning that while the mod was built off of Doom, specifically the GZ Doom source port, it was mostly just used as a stepping stone to create something completely different. The mod has fully 3D models, well-detailed textures, and creates a dark and dreary atmosphere that feels more like something from the mid-2000s era of games, like Half-Life 2 more so than the 90s tech it's built on. Even so, there's something I really have to get across at the start here, and that's while the mod looks great graphically, it all comes at a cost. I hate to get into technical stuff at the start here, but the mod runs like buns. The thing stutters a lot seemingly at random, with outdoor areas being the worst offenders, and it also has a tendency to crash all the freaking time. There is a so-called fix for the stutter by enabling pre-caching in the texture options menu, but even with this turned on, the mod would still stutter for me with the added benefit of always crashing when trying to load something, be it a save file or a level. If you decide to download and play Total Chaos for yourself, then be aware that you may have some similar problems. The main question is it worth dealing with all this crap in the end? Total Chaos is pretty light on story up front, and not a whole lot is explained about who you are, where you are, nor why you're even there. Most information is presented through notes that are littered throughout the game, as well as a bit of dialogue here and there sent over a radio. Still, there isn't a whole lot of explaining in depth on the surface. You take on the role of some guy who finds himself stuck in the ruins of an abandoned mining colony called Fort Oasis. The place is basically the exact opposite of its namesake, and it's little more than an empty, dilapidated husk of its former glory, and it doesn't look like it was all that to begin with. Even though the place is thought to have been long since abandoned, it doesn't take that much time before players are introduced to the colony's latest inhabitants. Whatever went on here must have been a real mess, since it's literally crawling with an assortment of mutated monsters. There's everything from your basic brutes that beat you to death to floating psychic electrical phenomenons, and even massive long-legged spider creatures. To be honest, a lot of the game's design in both art direction and enemy design reminds me of the mutants that inhabit the lower reaches of a game like Stalker. I really can't praise the mod's atmosphere and sound design enough. It manages to keep me constantly on edge with mysterious sounds that you really don't want to find the source of, but are forced onward on the only hope of escape, thinking that the only way out is through each location you visit as it gets worse and worse and worse. It's really unnerving. While the location and monsters may be similar to stuff from Stalker if you're familiar with that game, the combat is almost completely different. Total Chaos may have been built off of Doom and still use the first-person perspective, but it won't take long before you realize you're no Doom guy. There's not going to be any kind of ripping and tearing going on here, outside of enemies turning you into shredded lettuce if you give them the chance. The mod lays into the survival horror genre, and enemies can be difficult to deal with, while supplies for keeping yourself alive can be hard to find. While there are firearms, they aren't all that common, and ammunition for them is even rarer. For the most part, players are going to be doing the dance of death with melee weapons while diving in and out of range to land a hit without getting hit themselves. Everything from knives to shivs and shovels, as well as an axe and a sledgehammer, are what you've got to work with most of the time. Basically, anything heavy or sharp that can be picked up is usable in some way, but there's a lot to think about what to use and when to use it. Just about everything in Total Chaos is about balance, from weapon stats to your own personal stats and inventory management. Weapons come in many different types, sizes, and flavors that dictate different strengths and weaknesses. Attacking and dodging use up different amounts of a player's overall stamina gauge. Small, sharp weapons only use a small bit per swing, as they can attack quickly for some decent damage, but they tend to have low durability and can be difficult to impossible to repair if they break. Medium-sized weapons use up more stamina, but generally do less damage per swing, although they do have a secondary charge attack for dealing even more damage at the cost of even more stamina. Big heavy weapons, on the other hand, have the highest durability, and an even stronger charge attack. They also tend to have the most range, and unlike smaller weapons, are repairable when they break. To compensate, they take up the most inventory space and take a large chunk out of your overall inventory weight limit. Generally, the better a weapon is, the more you have to balance for it, and that meant I was spending a lot of my time playing inventory Tetris to make things fit. There's a lot more to find than just weapons in the dark halls of Fort Oasis, while managing more than only a stamina bar. You've got to keep your health up so you don't die, your radiation level down so you don't start losing health, your hunger down so you don't starve, and your bleeding level down so you don't bleed to death. Trying to deal with one usually means having to handle another at the same time. Most usable items have both positive and negative effects to worry about. A Stimpack syringe will heal you for a small amount, but also causes bleed and raises your hunger for some reason. Eating uncooked food lowers hunger, but also causes your radiation to go up, while lowering radiation by using pills causes hunger, or with alcohol lowers your health. Bandages will lower bleeding, but only a small amount per bandage, while coagulant pills lowers bleed the most, but causes hunger. Pills don't add to the overall inventory weight limit, but both bandages and food do. If you happen to be over the weight limit, then you won't be able to dodge, and will move slower overall, and that's not ideal when everything's out to kill you. Throughout the entire mod, players really have to make tough decisions when deciding what to take with them and what to leave behind. There are a few tricks, though, that can really help keep you alive. Using the game's crafting system to combine items together whenever you get the chance can help free up inventory space, since you only have to figure out where to put one item, opposed to multiple, though it's kind of annoying that you can only craft one thing at a time. The mod's level design usually lets players go back to previous areas in the same level, so you can drop some supplies in one area and come back for them later when you need them. While alcohol lowers both hunger and radiation, it also takes off a small chunk of your health, so it's better to use it with rags to make bandages since they weigh less than the bottle on their own and they don't hurt you. Hunger will start to deal some damage if it gets too high and slowly raises on its own over time, but cooked food is always preferable regardless of what it is, so keeping a cooker on you is pretty much always worth the effort. Also, the cooking sound is just oddly satisfying. Crates are scattered all over the place, but will lower a weapon's durability when cracking them open. I'd suggest always keeping a wrench on you, even though it doesn't do much damage as a weapon, since it doesn't have a durability meter, meaning that it can't break as you smash open crates. Guns are the same, but only shotguns have a melee attack, which isn't all that great to use in a fight. Bullets also only count towards the weight limit when they're unloaded in your inventory, so always keep your guns full even if you don't plan on shooting them all that often. Oh, and be sure you don't do what I did and fire everything you've got into the immortal eyeless monsters when they show up. Something to always remember is that things don't stop just because you're in the inventory screen. There are a few equipable slots that you can use with the number keys, and anything can be put there, from weapons to bandages and food, making them accessible on the fly. There are also throwable weapons like rocks, bricks, or even Molotov cocktails and pipe bombs that can really help you get out of a difficult situation. The main thing to keep in mind is that no matter how bleak the situation may be, there's almost always a way to get through it, as long as you're playing smartly and constantly quick-saving. There are only a very few spots throughout Total Chaos where it will autosave for you, which can be kind of problematic since enemies tend to do a lot of damage. While players don't generally have to fight enemies and instead just need to get past them, a lot of the time the only way you can go to progress will be full of them, and it's easy to get yourself stuck where you're both low on health and supplies. Having to do the same things and go through the same areas over and over and over again can get rather frustrating, since it isn't long before I came across mutants that could seemingly one-shot me regardless of how well I was managing my stats, or just easily overwhelm me since the combat only really works well for one-on-one fights. Some enemies, like the eyeless immortal things I mentioned earlier, aren't even worth fighting. These things have got to be the creepiest monsters in the roster, since not only do they not die, but they only move when you aren't looking directly at them, even though you can still hear them running around. Get too close though and they will kill you instantly. The good news, however, is that enemies are kinda stupid. Even the nastiest of baddies the mod has to throw at you have a tendency to get stuck on objects. I read that supposedly one of the few things Wadaholic and his team didn't change from Doom was enemy pathfinding, and it's not long before you can really tell. Enemies can only move in something like 8 directions, even though the levels aren't really designed with that limitation in mind. They can easily get confused by stairs and narrow doorways, and don't really understand that even though they can see you through a window, they can't actually get to you, even though you can still hit them. Most enemies just sort of walk at you till they're within attack range, and there's really only one type that does anything overly creative, and that's the one that can not only hit you with a full-screen psychic blast, but also blocks any bullets fired at it and returns them to sender. Firearms can get you out of most enemy encounters since they are very powerful, but you of course have to have the ammo for them. There's only 3 to find in the whole mod, but if you want them all, you're really gonna have to hunt for them. The level design for Total Chaos is rather reminiscent of Doom, even though it looks almost nothing like it. Levels are linear in the sense of having a start and end, but the areas between them are pretty open, giving players different places to go while searching for switches or keys to progress. They're also full of secret areas. Usually hidden just off the normal path or behind an enemy encounter are storerooms of supplies ripe for the pillaging. While many of them can be seen through windows or bars, actually getting into them can be a tad tricky, but they are almost always worth it. I was able to find quite a few of these myself throughout my time with the mod, and it was only thanks to them that I was able to get through each level without too much trouble. Although, getting the super shotgun was a bit of a pain. They tease you by having it in plain sight, just out of reach, tempting you to spend a good amount of time trying to figure out how to get the dang thing. If you happen to have already finished the mod and want to play it again, there is somewhat of a New Game Plus that you can activate through a secret code hidden at the end of the credits sequence that will give you the super shotgun right off the bat. But if you want it in a normal first playthrough, you are gonna have to earn it. It's not till close to the end of the mod when things start getting even more surreal than before, where you're given enough ammo to really make use of the thing. But when you do, it can really be cathartic. Overall, I found Total Chaos to be a bit of a mixed experience. I really liked the setting and the atmosphere the mod was able to build, but with enemies being unpredictable with how much damage they do, either just doing a chunk or flat out killing me in one hit regardless of what my health is, it can make it more frustrating than anything else. Having to constantly stop and mess around with the inventory screen gets to be a hassle rather quickly as well, and that's not even mentioning some of the more annoying level design. The Catacombs have got to be the worst part of the mod, as they're nothing but a pitch-black maze that has to be navigated with a limited supply of flares. No flashlights, nothing like that, just a handful of flares. And if your flares run out, you are done. There isn't really anything you can do besides turn on no-clip and cheat past it. There were many times where the game had me fully immersed into its world, and I enjoyed planning out my actions as well as outsmarting enemies by getting their attention, then laying in wait behind a corner with a shovel for them to get in range. Most of the time, though, I just found the thing overly frustrating as I tried to figure out where to go, what to do, and how to deal with the unpredictable enemies, let alone all the technical problems. The dev team did announce that they're working on some kind of director's cut version of Total Chaos, which will add even more content to an already beefy mod. I do hope that this manages to fix up most if not all of the crashing and stuttering problems, or else it probably isn't something I'm all that interested in trying. When the mod's good, it's really good, creating a dark, creepy, and foreboding experience without falling into the trappings of jump scares that so many things in the horror genre do. But whether or not you'll enjoy it is all up to how much crap you're willing to deal with to get through it. And I just about had my limit. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think of Total Chaos or this video in the comments section. I've been MegapieMan, and I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more of my stuff? Click on the video on the left for a look at Sigil, a Doom mod made by John Romero himself. Or click on the video on the right where I took a quick peek at Dark, a dark and atmospheric puzzle platformer.